we have 3 layers of muscle.
Is that good? Is that right?
So we have a superficial, a medial, or intermediate, and a deep layer. So rather than drawing muscles on top of each other,
That doesn't mean they made it right. They make it wrong all the time.
it's easier to think of them and learn them into 3 layers.
Trust me, I know people.
In actuality, guys, this anterior forearm is probably the most difficult of the region of muscles to learn just because there's so many of them that are parallel and look similar. So, Joe asked why I have the 3 diagrams, and we're going to learn them in 3 layers, all right? And that helps you keep them straight. So when my daughter was having to learn her muscles from diagrams, I brought her over here. She said, Mom, our test isn't on models. I said, I know, but if you understand how they're layered, then you'll understand your diagrams a little bit better. So the first diagram up here is similar or identical to the one that you have in your lab, your lecture packet on page 33. And the nerve of the anterior forearm, so this compartment is anterior forearm, and this is a ventral view, obviously. The nerve of the anterior forearm is the median nerve, okay? One muscle and half of another muscle are done by the ulnar nerve. But primarily, it's the median nerve. The ulnar nerve is, we'll look at tomorrow, it does most of the muscles of the hand. So again, if you look at this model, this nerve right here running down the middle of the arm, and then dividing into 2 and running down the middle of the forearm is the median nerve. Right? Over on the little finger side is the ulnar nerve. So the couple of muscles that the ulnar nerve interfaces on that side of the forearm, on the medial side of the forearm. So we're going to look at these different layers, and I'll turn the rights back up again in just a moment. So over on the left is the superficial layer. This is what you see when you look at the model with everything together. Then if we take off 4 muscles, we'll see that 1 muscle in the intermediate layer. We take that one off, and we have 2 muscles in the deep layer. Okay? It's a little easier to keep them straight when we learn at it in that fashion. Except for the deep layer, all of these muscles have a common origin, which is the medial epicondyle. Remember the humerus flared out and formed lateral epicondyles, which are sites of muscle attachment. So most of our flexor muscles in the anterior forearm have their origin from the medial epicondyle. The lateral epicondyle will be the posterior or extensor muscles. So we're going to start with this first muscle, and you may not have noticed, but I put up finally last night the website for University of Washington's radiology department, and it shows individual muscles, makes it a little bit clearer what the origins and insertions are, and that helps you understand function, all right, because on the models, they're kind of all mashed together and you can't see that very well. So this is going to be the superficial layer. And we'll start off with a short muscle. Comes from the medial epicondyle and inserts onto the radius. The name of this muscle is the pronator teres. Do you guys remember what pronator does? Turns the palm face down. All right? So, again, we talked about this with the biceps brachii. Pronator teres. It's going to come from the medial epicondyle, grab onto the radius, and pull the radius over like that to do pronation. Again, any muscle that supinates or pronates has to insert onto the radius. Okay? This one crosses only the elbow joint. So that is our pronator teres. Teres means round. And there's another square pronator down here called pronator quadratus, which we're not going to do. Jeff doesn't like that. He thinks I've taken away too many muscles that he had to learn.
Yeah, you said you're going soft.
Realistic. More realistic. right, so pronator teres. The next three muscles of this superficial layer all cross the wrist joint. So in addition to flexing the elbow, they are going to flex the wrist. All right. So the first one is called flexor carpi radialis. It doesn't insert on the radius. It has the word carpi in its name. It crosses the carpal bones. And its attachment is to the second and third metacarpals. All right, so second, third metacarpals, and we have flexor carpi radialis. So because it crosses the elbow joint, it will flex the elbow. Because it crosses the wrist joint, it will flex the wrist. Okay? So it's going to assist, it's a synergistic, it aids, it's not the prime mover, but it will aid by flexing the elbow, and it crosses the wrist, so it flexes the wrist. Okay, we don't really have any prime mover or agonist for flexing of the wrist, we just have a whole bunch of muscles whose tendons cross the wrist. So here is flexor carpi radialis, and you can see its tendon goes to second and third metacarpals. The middle muscle doesn't insert really onto bone. It inserts onto a thick piece of fascia that covers your palm. And you can kind of see it flare out here like a webbing of a duck. And so it goes to the palm, and hence is called the palmaris longus. It's mostly tendon. And it's going to come out here and just kind of end there. Okay, so that is palmaris longus. And then the fourth and last muscle is flexor carpi ulnaris, the fourth last of the superficial group. It comes almost down the side of the forearm, so there's a bit of a gap between it and these tendons, and it comes down and attaches to the pisiform and our fifth metacarpal. So if you turn the model on its side, you'll find a little piece of the ulna, and on the anterior aspect of that will be the flexor carpi ulnaris, going to fifth metacarpal. Let's see, I'm missing one here. Flexor carpi radialis. Now, in addition to flexing the wrist, there's a couple of other movements that flexor carpi radialis and flexor carpi ulnaris will do. So flexor carpi radialis comes to the second and third metacarpals, and so it will tilt or bend the wrist towards the thumb side. That's called abduction or radial deviation. Okay? So it's going to do that. It's going to cock the hand out like that. So abduction, moving away from the midline, or radial deviation, either term. And I have radial deviation, I think, on your lecture notes. Flexor carpi ulnaris attaches to the fifth metacarpal, so it's going to pull the wrist inward like this, so it does adduction or ulnar deviation. Okay? So flexor carpi radialis does radial deviation, pulling towards away, taking the thumb and pulling laterally. Flexor carpi ulnaris does ulnar deviation or adduction.
Do you have two underlined with blue?
palmaris longus is blue. Okay, this one should be green. Thank you. Okay. Now, if you cock your wrist, okay, kind of tighten it like this, you should see 3 tendons along, or 3 elevations along the inside of your wrist here. The one closest to your thumb is flexor carpi radialis, all right? The middle one is the median nerve, and the next one is the palmaris longus. If you see only 2, you're missing palmaris longus. About 15% of the population is missing it either in one forearm or in both. All right. I had a student in the morning class that had a really good flexor carpi ulnaris as well. I can't even see mine, but that's going to be way over here. All right. So if I'll come around, you can see I have 3. So I have palmaris longus and flexor carpi radialis. So if you can only see 2, then you may be missing palmaris longus.
My wrists are too fat. I can
You can feel it? Okay, well, if you can feel it, okay? So flexor, this would be flexor carpi radialis, and this one right here is the palmaris longus, and this would be median nerve. And my flexor, I can feel flexor carpi ulnaris there, but it's not, I can't see it. Okay?
Oh, like you can.
You're missing it.
Well, but what's that one right there then?
So you've got tendons deeper than that that belong to flexor digitorum superficialis. Flexor carpi ulnaris would be over here, but this is your palmaris longus, and that's your flexor carpi radialis. And not palmaris longus, median nerve. So you're missing the palmaris longus. Yeah.
Yeah, 15.
Dude, I'm.
You're special.
I'm not gonna high five to that.
Okay. That would be your flexor longus right here. Showing that.
It's a buzzkill that I'm part of the 15%.
Hi, that's what I'm trying to you.
Are you?
You can only see one because my wrists are too fat. But I feel some on the other.
My wrists are weird. I have 3 of
There.
Actually, it's like a workout. Just stop short. It wanted it.
I don't think this one has turning my like this.
Don't have to.
Yeah. I have a total of 4.
Yeah. I
have like some other, like that's one right there.
Если так он мне сказал,
This one under here, I want to know what's that one.
скажи, надо заполнять сиерка. Я всегда думала, что нет сиерка.
They're not messing around.
Okay, so that is the those 4 muscles are the superficial layer.
So if we're missing one, we don't need to know it, right? That's the rule? Since we're deprived anyway?
You just can't study it, you have to hold somebody else's hand. So all but one crosses the wrist joint. All of them cross the elbow joint, so they're all going to do flexion, all right? They're going to be synergistic to the brachialis, which is our prime mover for flexion. And then the flexors and palmaris longus will flex the wrist or do the deviation. So now let's move to the intermediate layer. Well, let me just walk around first to make sure all of you have seen these. Okay. So pronator teres, the short one. Flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and then we have to come all the way over here for flexor carpi ulnaris, right next to the ulnaris.
Palmaris longus and
Okay.
flexor carpi ulnaris.
So pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and all the way over here on the side is flexor carpi ulnaris, which is why it's hard to see that tendon for most people because it's on down the side here. But right next to that is the ulna. You can see the bone right there. And that's what we're feeling right here, okay?
So the one that we're missing though,
Palmaris longus would be this middle one here.
that's the one that we're missing?
Uh-huh. You only see two. Because the median nerve forms one of those three. So it goes, no, this goes for a small. This goes for the small model behind me. So this would be pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and then over here on the side next to the ulna, flexor carpi ulnaris. Yeah, that's the ulnar nerve. The median nerve would be underneath here. But
Is it the whole muscle that's missing?
Yeah, we missing like the whole muscle.
yeah,
But it's a tiny ass muscle, isn't it? Like,
it is a tiny muscle.
You're weak doing this.
prior. I was hoping she'd say that. Well,
No, yeah, another one.
whatever. I don't need that. I don't need that. Whatever.
Мышца надо достань предыдущие цвета.
So there's your pronator teres.
So genetically, that's why I can't play the guitar like Van Halen.
Right, doesn't pop up if you do this.
I mean, what do you want to do about it? I don't have my palmaris longus.
Okay, so what's your pronator teres?
Yeah, okay. No. What else do you Piano. That doesn't mean that I can like control it as well as somebody that has it. Yeah, I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb with one finger.
I recall about anybody can do anything they want. So nobody can say they don't have a
Okay, so let's look at the intermediate layer now.
I didn't say I couldn't draw. But I can't play like Van Halen. That's what I said. I didn't say I can't play guitar. I said I can't play like Van Halen.
Most of it comes off of the medial epicondyle, but some of it comes off the radius. And this is going to go to the middle phalanges. All right? So it's going to go to this bone right here, the middle. We have proximal, middle, and distal phalanges on our digits 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it's going to go to the middle one. But there is a deep muscle that sends its tendons all the way to the distal phalanges. So if you look on this model, and you look at the hand, you'll notice that here is a forked tendon. So it's split for digits 2, 3, 4, and 5. That is the tendon of flexor digitorum superficialis. And that allows a deeper tendon to go all the way to the distal phalanx. Flexor digitorum superficialis is a superficial muscle. Digitorum means it moves the digits. All right? So this one is going to come from the medial epicondyle, and it's going to insert on the middle phalanx of digits 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's going to insert by having a forked tendon, and then it's going to have its fibers coming off of here. And it's going to have its origin off the medial epicondyle. This is a very broad muscle, and it's the only one that we see at this level. Notice how many joints it crosses. Let me write the name on it, and then we'll go over those joints. So flexor digitorum superficialis. It crosses the elbow joint. So it's going to do flexion. It crosses the wrist. So it's going to flex the wrist. It crosses the metacarpal phalangeal joint. We call the knuckle joint the MP joint, metacarpal phalangeal. So it's going to do this. Okay, not the extension part, but the flexion part, like little kids wave bye-bye. Okay, so it's going to flex the MP joint, and it crosses the first interphalangeal or IP joint, so it's going to do this. Okay, flexes the elbow, flexes the wrist, flexes the MP joint, flexes the first IP joint. What it doesn't do is that. It won't bend the tip of the finger, because it doesn't cross that joint. Okay? So that's flexor digitorum superficialis. Okay. So far, one exception, all of these muscles are being innervated by the median nerve. The one exception is flexor carpi ulnaris. It's innervated by the ulnar nerve, and that kind of makes sense with its name. Right? Now take off the flexor digitorum superficialis, and you'll see two muscles deep to that. Neither of these muscles have their origin from the medial epicondyle. So the last two muscles will not flex the elbow. So we're going to look at the deep layer. Okay. This one comes off of both radius and ulna, and its tendons are going to pass through the V like this and go all the way to the distal phalanx. So we're going to have the flexor digitorum profundus. Profund means deep. A profound thinker is a deep thinker. Okay? So we have then flexor digitorum profundus. Mostly off of the ulna, but a little bit from the, we got a brighter blue here. So flexor digitorum profundus does not cross the elbow joint. And this is the muscle, half of which is innervated by ulnar nerve. The medial half. Okay? So the tendon, the muscles whose tendons go to the fourth and fifth digit are going to be innervated by ulnar nerve. So our 1.5 muscles are flexor carpi ulnaris, and the medial, most medial to fourth and fifth digits, ulnar nerve. And then the next muscle, this one right here, goes to the thumb. Our word for thumb is pollex. Okay? We have another flexor of the thumb that helps to form this mound of muscle right here on the thumb. So we have a short muscle and a long muscle that flexes the thumb. This is called flexor pollicis longus, and its tendon goes all the way to the distal phalanx of the thumb. Remember, there's only 2 phalanges in the thumb. So that muscle that covers up the radius deeply is going to be flexor pollicis longus. Does everybody see that one? So on the thumb side, we have flexor pollicis longus. Right beside it, flexor digitorum longus. Okay? So We take this one off. Thumb side, flexor pollicis longus. The rest of it, flexor digitorum longus under the median nerve. Okay, that's your median nerve right here. Flexor pollicis, flexor digitorum.
And you said it's with the distal phalanx?
Flexor pollicis, like the distal one, yeah.
Distal phalanx.
So, yeah, it should go to the distal. Okay, so on this one, here's flexor pollicis and flexor digitorum profundus. Okay, yeah.
Distal.
Okay, so on your thumb side, flexor pollicis. This one's flexor digitorum profundus. So flexor pollicis here. Flexor digitorum profundus here. This is part of your flexor digitorum superficialis. So that's your tendon of flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and it's that one. Yeah. So on this one, flexor digitorum superficialis is here. Take that off. There's flexor digitorum superficialis. That one off. Left side, flexor pollicis.
Probably hate me.
Yeah.
From left to right, we're going from top to bottom.
Yes. The same order as the diagram in your lesson. Here's flexor pollicis. Here's flexor digitorum profundus.
God, I'm a mutant. Sucks. 15%. Meatlets and mutants also.
За 4 мышцы нервы нервируют.
Why your name's Meaglet? Sounds like creature. Yes.
But I could be part of X-Men.
Я иду.
Superpower is missing a muscle.
Can't flip anyone off.
Okay, you want to take a picture? Go ahead. Your form and then we'll. Because I'm trying to give you Thursday off next week, so you don't get a whole bunch of new muscles that are on the test the very next day.
Dude, I'm so missing that muscle. That just makes sense to me now.
Not yet.
You have room for your other muscles.
Идет стопудово. Просто я перевесила тут последнюю.
You missed that one, didn't you? Okay, whoops, that's why you're. Now you can talk.
And everyone's
Well, no, it helps me being part of the rest though. Like,
Well, until someone does to each other.
Говорят, что надо.
Can't dribble basketball.
Не зря это.
Those are a little bit easier.
Your wrists are retarded.
Hard to practice a little bit. That's just
I'm gonna like cross that one off my list and be like, you
Okay, remember the water soluble pens? They work really well here.
disappointing you didn't.
Yeah, we were looking forward to
Yeah,
drawing the face.
well, if you had all the
I'll bring
muscles.
they're in my computer bag, I brought them home
Don't
from Sac State. I've just been wearing long, it's been too cold to wear the kind of outfit I need to draw this on me, but.
Just wear long johns, white long johns. Or white kettle duds, you know, you can just, then you can just draw all over and you'll be warm.
You know, right?
Waffle pattern of long shapes.
Yeah, you guys have this on video, so I'm not sure I want to
Tight.
show up in long johns.
they're called kettle beds.
No, you just unzip it and you go really quick.
Yeah.
Or you can give yourself, I don't know, about for 1 minute. Then you'll free
Okay, now we're looking at posterior compartment of
I
the
was gonna
arm.
ask you what a kettle bed was, but you told me.
Она все равно уже произойдет.
She's crazy. It's just their
Silky and they're long underwear. I was introduced to my ex-fiance in Connecticut because I'm like, I can't, it's too cold, so he's only like 3 pair of kettle beds.
I'm apparently gonna have to go inspect these kettle beds when you buy them.
JCPenney, Sears, Kmart, all over.
Kettle beds.
They're women's long
I'm
johns.
gonna ask for some for Christmas.
They are so
I'm
nice.
gonna write kettle beds in my office.
Yeah, because instead of tight, I mean, they're so soft and yummy. Like, oh,
Makes you soft.
You asked why?
You know when you get new shoes like these slippers and they're like yummy on the inside?
Class, right?
You're like,
I'm taking 17
They're like
minutes,
fleece
so
lined leggings.
I can't
they're better, not that.
handle this.
Those are my favorite things, fleece lined leggings.
I know, I'm too fat to wear them, but you know what? I'm gonna wear some of those.
Well, you know,
I wear them under my clothes.
gotta transfer, man. It's not me.
That's my favorite pair of pants. It's like holes on the pockets. Yeah, so you can see through them. So I wear leggings under it.
I feel 14, it's not exactly much better. 6 is
Just
never
be able to see my underwear that color. Conversation on YouTube is gonna be awesome.
Oh, all the other ones are like
This battery's
regular
gonna die.
G, but like psychology.
It's got one little bar.
Battery.
While she's drying, let's do it.
Let's try.